My name's Mary, and I'm here from the University of Birmingham, and I'm going to speaking to you today about higher education in the COVID-19 pandemic. So I work for the University of Birmingham, where I previously studied English. You can see a picture of me graduating on the right-hand side of the screen there. So Birmingham's a university really close to my heart. The nature of this presentation is that a lot of the information is going to be from the perspective of Birmingham, but it also can be applied to other universities, and there'll be lots of useful information on here, hopefully. So I'm going to get into it then. So what I will be covering today are a couple of key areas. So how university life is working at the moment, as we're sort of still in the midst of the pandemic, what support is available, what studying is like at the university, but also broader. So what research is going on? What are universities doing to react to the pandemic? And what is the situation like now? So day to day, things are changing, and we've had to respond and react to that. So I thought it might be useful to give you an update of the situation from Birmingham right now, and also in the UK right now. And also, lastly, some top tips for you to be aware of. Okay, so this year we welcomed students onto the university campus in some respects as normal. Obviously, there was some changes as well in place, but there was some aspect of normality about it. So I just thought I'd talk you through our welcoming process. So we did allow for students to start their studies online and to have continued their studies solely online if they wish. But we also encourage students to come to the university and start and move into their accommodation if they needed to. And all international students that needed to isolate when they arrived in their accommodation were given that isolation period completely free of charge. So it wasn't charged on their accommodation free, just as a gesture from the university to say, you know, we're aware that you don't necessarily want to be in this situation and having to isolate, and we're not going to charge you extra for that. And we did have some extra activities going on that we wouldn't usually have had to try and just react to the pandemic and to make it a smoother process as possible for students arriving on campus. So when you arrived at the university, when you're registering, when you're signing in all your documents, you were given aspect to a University of Birmingham mask, as you can see on the screen there. And there were lots of advisors around campus to help support you. Any questions that you had, you could go to one of the Ask Me team that you can see there. And then you've got the pictures on the right-hand side of the screen and the left-hand side. And this is taken from one of our student accommodations, the Vale, where we ran the Vale Fest as a slightly modified experience, but we still managed to get it up and running nonetheless. So as you can see, students were wearing masks throughout the time and were grouped into their house bubbles, their flat bubbles. But we still had some great opportunities there. So we've got live music as part of the Vale Fest, and there was some mini golf, some food canteens, places to eat. So lots of great opportunities there. So even though it was Welcome Week in light of the pandemic, it was some aspect of normality as well. We've also put in a whole network of different support systems that I'm going to be talking about later on. But just to also elaborate on, if you had to isolate as part of your university experience, there was some support from the university to try and help you through that isolation period. So I've included a picture of the We Care You Share box that was delivered to flats and shared amongst flatmates. So you can see there's a whole host of different home cooked meals from the university, and some other just basics, sugar, coffee, anything like that. So that was all there for students to help them through their isolation period, and just to make sure that you had that initial sort of groceries that you needed. So that's that aspect of it. But just to reiterate that campus is open, and they were open at the start of September, and we've continued to be open as well. So the study spaces are open, the library's open, the seminar rooms, personal tutors spaces as well. You can still go and see them or arrange meetings online. So the reality is, if you go to Birmingham today, obviously there's social distancing, there's certain procedures in place, but you still have that experience, and there is still a buzz on campus of students moving around, going and getting a coffee, getting some food as well as part of their student experience. We've kept campus facilities open to try and maintain the university experience, with the caveat of we're going through this pandemic, so we want to keep everybody safe. So there are some restrictions in place, and we've been making sure to keep students safe, that students are getting the right advice that they need. So a couple of key messages from our government and from the university is that covering up really impossible. So wearing a face covering inside wherever 2 meter distance isn't possible. That's an essential aspect of trying to stop the spread of the virus on campus. Keeping your distance from one another. So there is a new one-way system around campus. So to avoid any sort of difficulties there, really easy to follow. You just have to keep left in the majority of cases to follow that system. It's important, obviously, to keep clean, stay sanitized, keep washing your hands, sanitize them regularly to try and stop the spread. And self-isolation and testing is also at the core of what we're doing as a university. And so if you do get symptoms, however mild, it's important that you get tested straight away and follow self-isolation advice. And another thing that we advise students to do is to socialise sensibly. So we understand that socialising is a big part of the university experience, but we encourage students to be aware of and follow the local and the UK government guidance on who you can socialise with and where. So at the moment, we're coming out of a UK-wide national lockdown and going into a new tiering system. So the advice, depending on where you are in the country and who you can socialise with, is different. So it's really, really important that students stay up to date with that. And as a university, it's important for us to communicate to students what the guidance is and how you can follow that guidance and stay safe ultimately, and stop the spread of the virus on campus. So you can see here, this is one of our figures from the university wearing one of our branded University of Birmingham masks there. So even the statues on campus are trying to stay safe and stop the spread of coronavirus. So I thought it would also be useful to communicate a little bit more on the university's test and trace system. So test, trace and protect is the university's process, which complements the NHS, so that's UK National Health Services and Public Health England's process on track and trace. So there's a couple of measures that are involved in the university's own procedures. So number one, to ensure students and staff understand the symptoms of COVID really clearly. So communicating that to students really effectively. So they are aware of when and how to get tested, how to report a positive test case, the right people to report to, and how to identify and contact anyone who might have come into close contact with a confirmed case of COVID on campus. So we've been doing a lot of different things to try and test and track the students who have tested positive and make sure that we are contacting the right people who have come into contact with them. As a part of that, a big part of the test, trace and protect, we opened up a testing site on the University of Birmingham's campus. So it's really easy for students to gain access to a test. So they are aware of, if they have symptoms, they can get tested straight away, and then they can isolate if needs be, or just following the other procedures if not. So that was a really, really important part of our test and trace system, and it's allowed students and staff to stay safe. So at Birmingham, we've actually been quite lucky, but also careful in relation to our COVID tests, which has meant that we've not had too many cases on campus and too many sort of students that need to be isolated from that. So where other universities cases rocketed when students arrived on campus, Birmingham, although they did increase, we managed to keep them, and now they've gone back to sort of not many higher over than 50 cases a week. So it's really quite a manageable procedure. So the good thing for you coming in the coming years, that it's to be aware of the test trace procedures and to be aware that it's all going fine at the moment, and we are equipped to deal with the pandemic and to make sure students are kept safe throughout it. So that's a little bit about campus life and how that's functioning. But I thought it'd also be useful to give you a bit of an explanation in what studying is like in 2020. So your course is going to be delivered in a number of different ways. So we've always done a little bit of online learning as part of the user experience. So when I studied at Birmingham, my lectures were recorded. It gives you a really great way to access the lectures after they have gone on, and you can go over the recordings and check things through and go into a little bit more detail and go a little bit slower maybe than your lecturers go. So that's been a really valuable part of our university system anyway. But we've also put in a bit more online learning as part of the student experience. So you have individual tutorials with your personal academic, weekly tutor groups, and it really is, there's some flexibility about whether we move those tutorial groups online and whether you want to meet your personal tutor online. So they are both accessible online, but there is still the option to be able to come onto campus and to have a face-to-face meeting as well, within the remits of staying safe at all times. And we've been really lucky to keep our main study spaces open to ensure that you still are able to study outside of your university experience in a safe place. So another key aspect of the COVID pandemic and how we're dealing with it is the student support available at Birmingham. So there's more support than ever for students that are coming onto campus to help them with the whole transition to university, being aware that there is more difficulty this year for students coming on to campus as the whole threat of the pandemic, and it can be difficult at times, and there's been new problems that have been thrown into the student experience that we wouldn't have usually had to deal with. So There's a whole breadth of different support available, from support with your studying, mental health, wellbeing support. So there's a triage service. You can ring up and speak to somebody and they will put you through to the counselling service if you need to. You can set up one-to-one meetings via Zoom as part of that. So there's a whole wealth of different student support available. And this is not just unique to Birmingham. All universities across the UK are putting more funding and more opportunity to student support. So last but not least, I'm going to be talking about the research that universities and Birmingham in particular is doing to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic, as it's a key answer to that question. So different universities are involved in different aspects of combating COVID-19. And here at Birmingham, we're really proud of some of the work that's going on. So we are leading the UK Coronavirus Immunology Consortium to understand immune responses to coronavirus. And we've also been involved in mapping how COVID-19 spreads and evolves using whole genome sequencing. We've also been working closely with the Department of Health and Social Care to increase capacity for COVID testing. And as part of that, as I've already mentioned, opening the testing centre on campus, and been a central hub pioneer to collect electronic health data to help us understand the progress of the pandemic and how it impacts on COVID and non-COVID patients as well. We've also been supporting a nationwide support consortium to seek to understand and improve long-term health effects and outcomes for patients who have been in hospital, confirmed or suspected COVID. And we've also, on another side of the coin, as well as looking at the health aspects of the virus, we've also been looking at the economic impact to help support actions designed to respond to some of the most damaging effects of the pandemic on the region's economy and local economies as well. So various different strands in which our research and our researchers at the university are getting involved in combating COVID-19. So what is the situation now? I've explained a little bit about what the campus looks like, how students were welcomed onto campus, but what is the university doing in light of the current restrictions within the UK? So government's expectation, and the university is sort of planning that this expectation will continue, is that students will remain on campus and in residence, and it will be supported with a blend of face-to-face and online teaching. Research, really important that that continues, and the university buildings remain open to maximise study space and opportunities for students. So there is a student experience. It is modified, but the UK government has made that decision to keep universities open, and we presume that this method and this approach will continue as the COVID-19 pandemic progresses. So what about you? What advice do I have for you moving forward? So I think it's really important to keep up to date with the latest UK government guidance. I put up the date on the start of this presentation. All the information that I've given you is up to date as the part of the pandemic. So it's all up to date as of now, but things are obviously changing, and it's important that you keep up to date. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to get in touch with the university, and if there's anything further you'd like to know. But ultimately, it's really important to try and think positively about the experience. It is still going on, but we are able to adapt to it. And as I've said previously and throughout this presentation, there is still a university student experience to get out of it now.